Jarek's first love was dying. When I heard the news, he and I were having our wedding ceremony. Without hesitation, he threw the ring in his hand away and left in a hurry. His back figure became smaller and smaller, until he turned the corner and disappeared. I forced a smile. As I was smiling, 2 tears streamed down my face. The next second, someone picked up the ring on the ground and put it on my hand. His half-brother wiped away my tears and said, "Don't cry, sister-in-law." No, wife. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful novels every day. Now the story begins. When we were exchanging rings, the phone in Jarek's pocket rang urgently. It rang again and again. The MC who was trying to save the situation forced a smile, but couldn't cover up such a mistake with his words. Jarek took out his phone impatiently. After seeing the caller ID, he answered the phone in full view of everyone. The MC walked off the stage, took the microphone and said with a forced laugh, "It seems that it's the blessings from an important friend far away." The guests below the stage didn't know the situation. Although they were dissatisfied, the atmosphere was still peaceful. Only he and I on the stage became paler and paler, because on the other end of the phone, his first love Ivy was crying and saying, "Jarek, I had a car accident. Maybe I'll never see you again." He, who was always calm and self-possessed, had his fingers holding the phone trembling. He was afraid of losing Ivy. I was also afraid that he would leave immediately. Sure enough, the diamond-inlaid ring was thrown to the ground by him. Without hesitation or explanation, he turned around and left. With Ivy in trouble, he couldn't just stand by and do nothing. He wished he could fly to her side immediately. I grabbed his wrist. "Jarek, please don't go." He turned around and glanced at me. There was no affection in his eyes at all, as if I were a heinous villain. "Lena, can't you be more reasonable? It's a matter of life and death." After saying that, he shook off my hand fiercely. The strength was so great that he almost pushed me to the ground. I gritted my teeth and stood firm. A dense pain welled up in my heart. There was an uproar below the stage. My father's face turned pale. Many guests looked at me on the stage with sympathy. The MC stood there stunned, not knowing how to smooth things over. This was probably the first time he had encountered such a thing, which could be regarded as the biggest accident in his career. But it wasn't the case for me. In Jarek's heart, it was never a choice between me and Ivy. I had always been an optional and dispensable addition. Even when Ivy was okay, he had abandoned me for her many times. What's more, Ivy was exaggeratingly crying about such a serious matter as having a car accident. His back figure became smaller and smaller. No one stopped him until he disappeared around the corner. I said to myself, "It's okay. It's okay, Lena." When Ivy came back to the country, I had already estimated the worst outcome. I forced a smile and wanted to take the microphone to deal with this accident, but I overestimated myself. I covered my face and smiled. Before I knew it, tears flowed out between my fingers. Someone in the guest seat slowly stood up, picked up the ring that Jarek had thrown into the dust, and put it on my hand carefully. It was Felix, Jarek's half-brother. When the wedding march was about to end, his finger pads touched my face with smudged makeup and wiped away my tears. "Don't cry, sister-in-law." "No, wife." No one except him and me on the stage heard this absurd confession. He stood in front of me like a towering mountain, blocking all the gossip. He picked up the microphone, apologized, canceled the wedding banquet, and enlivened the atmosphere. The child sitting next to him said loudly after he finished speaking, "Pretty sister, don't cry. I'll marry you when I grow up." Throughout the whole process, I only remembered one sentence. My good-for-nothing younger brother is almost blind. He mistook a pearl for a fisheye. Now he should go to the ophthalmology department to treat his eyes. Lena has been wronged and has endured him all this time. After the wedding banquet ended, Jarek didn't call me even once. My father hadn't given me a good look since Jarek left. "What's wrong with you? You can't even keep a person in check and caused such a big scandal." After everyone had left, my father was the first to speak. His tone was full of blame for me and there was no trace of pity. Because this wedding, to put it nicely, was a deal. And to put it bluntly, it was selling the daughter. The company needed 3 rounds of financing to go public, and the Lorraine family happened to be able to provide that much capital. But no one would give up their benefits for no reason. Their condition was that they needed an obedient daughter-in-law. I, who had been the best friend with Jarek for more than 10 years, happened to be the perfect candidate. This time, Jarek's leaving was just another piece of gossip for the Lorraine family. But for our company, this scandal was enough to affect the listing. I looked at this biological father of mine and just felt it was ridiculous. What are you laughing at? Hurry up and get him back and clarify the matter. He slapped the table heavily, and 2 or 3 drops of tea splashed out of the teacup. Still feeling angry, he threw the set of his favorite teacups to the ground in a fit of rage. The porcelain shattered into pieces, and the tea inside spilled onto the burgundy carpet. An idiom flashed through my mind. Spilled water cannot be recovered. It referred to that cup of tea, my relationship with Jarek, and also my relationship with my father. I said, I won't look for Jarek anymore, and I won't marry him as you tell me to. He stood up and stared at me fixedly. What did you say? I laughed sincerely and repeated, I won't look for your beloved son-in-law to make any bullshit clarification, and I won't have anything to do with him anymore. I thought I would go wandering, and be like a weed, growing freely with the wind. The words my mother left me when she left home at my age of 8 appeared in my mind again. I had resented my mother for many years, but finally I understood her this time. He stared at my face, which was 6 parts similar to my mother's, and cursed fiercely, ungrateful daughter. Before he could say more dirty words, there was a knock on the door. 3 people from the Lorraine family entered the door, as if they hadn't heard any argument. Mr. Lorraine and Miss Lorraine sat down naturally. Ms. Lorraine opened her mouth to apologize. It's our child who was thoughtless and made both families lose face. My father put on an act. After leisurely drinking a sip of tea, he offered an excuse. It's normal for young people to have their own thoughts. After saying that, he didn't forget to glance at me, as if hinting at me. I didn't pay attention to him. Instead, I stared at Felix, who was sitting opposite me in a daze. Was it my auditory hallucination about what he said just now? He, who had always been reluctant to deal with the affairs of the Lorraine family, was surprisingly enthusiastic today. Could it be that he wanted to interfere in the Lorraine family business? Pull Jarek down from his position, and then drag me into his plan. He probably found the wrong person. While I was thinking, Felix was also looking at me. When his long and slender eyebrows met my gaze, they raised slightly. The joy between his eyebrows diluted his usual calmness. When the negotiation between the 2 families of businessmen was almost done, Ms. Lorraine took my hand and put the jade bracelet on her hand onto my wrist. The inappropriate size squeezed my wrist painfully. Ivy, that boy of my family is just acting on impulse and doesn't understand your goodness. Auntie will teach him a lesson later. You call him first and ask him to come back. Felix, who hadn't spoken all the time, smiled and retorted, is he still a 3-year-old child that he needs someone to call him to come home? Auntie Chen, you were thoughtless when you were a mistress when you were young, and you're still thoughtless now. If the bracelet doesn't fit, don't force it on. If a person doesn't fit, they should be replaced. As he said that, he walked over and smashed the jade bracelet that had been forced onto my hand into pieces. Not satisfied with slapping Auntie Chen twice in a row, he continued to add fuel to the fire and asked Mr. Lorraine, Dad, Jarek's eye problem should be inherited from you. Do you want to go to the ophthalmology department to see a doctor? You might as well give the company to me during your recuperation period. It was so exciting. I held back my laughter. Before everyone got angry, Felix pulled me and left the scene quickly. After being pulled into the car, I was very confused. We stared at each other, as if we weren't that familiar with each other. He said, "Fasten your seatbelt." I obediently fastened it as I didn't want to die. Where are we going? I looked up at him, my face full of question marks. Didn't you pull me out? After being stared at by me for a long time, the corners of his mouth turned up and he turned his head away and didn't look at me anymore. The neon lights outside the car flashed by quickly. Without having to say much, the car window rolled down, and the refreshing night wind blew into the car, as if it could blow away all the troubles. I said, "Thank you." Today was supposed to be a very awful day, but everything seemed to be less embarrassing because of his appearance. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something. Just then, the phone rang. It was Jarek. It was rare. In the past, he wouldn't answer even if I called 10 times. Now he actually called. After answering the phone, a delicate and sweet female voice rang in my ear. "Miss, I'm sorry to have disturbed your moral wedding. I didn't expect that Jarek would rush over with just one phone call. I'll apologize to you in person later." I could even smell a hint of being sly through the receiver. She must have thought of it. She thought of it every time. So she repeated the same old trick, over and over again, without getting tired of using it. I didn't respond. After a moment of silence on the other end of the phone, there came a rustling sound. When the voice came again, it was already another person. Why are you apologizing just because you had a car accident? Just lie down and recover from your injuries. The wedding is not as important as a human life. They were playfully bickering intimately. I was like torturing myself and didn't hang up the phone for a long time. Until at a red light, Felix snatched the phone from my fingertips that had turned white from gripping it with his slender fingers. He sneered, "The wedding is not as important as a human life, so the bride is mine now." Then with a gentle touch of his finger, he hung up the phone. He looked down at me and I was staring at him, puffing out his cheeks. He retorted, "Do you have any objections?" I shook my head. Even without him, I would have hung up the phone. No. The urgent ringtone rang again. The phone spun around in his hand and then he held it tightly again. The situation had changed. Now it was my turn not to answer the phone. He raised his eyebrows and asked me, "Answer it or not? Up to you." I didn't have the mood to share such a scandal with him. The concern that I had once longed for but couldn't get seemed very cheap now that it was within my reach. He didn't answer and directly turned off the phone for me. After driving around for a while, he didn't send me home but dropped me off at a certain hotel. My mood improved a lot, so I also gave him a piece of advice. If you want to find someone for a marriage alliance, I can help you find someone else. His face darkened immediately. With a snort, he slammed the car door shut and left. Before leaving, he called me a coward. I was indeed a coward. That's why I clung tightly to that bit of warmth from my childhood. When I was 8 years old, after my mother and father had a big quarrel, my father slammed the door and left. Then my mother packed her luggage and left too. I held my mother's hand and cried for a long time. She was reluctant to part with me, but she still left. The only words she left for me were, "Little dear, everyone should first be themselves before taking on other labels. I want to go wandering, to be a weed and grow savagely." When I needed someone to accompany me the most, the person I expected disappeared without a trace. And just then Yarek appeared. In his garden, he picked a cluster of hyacinths and handed them to me who was squatting at the intersection waiting for my mother. The vibrant flowers healed my barren heart. I held on to that bit of warmth and got through every day and night without my mother. However, warm kindness came with a price. His mother entered the family as a mistress and forced Felix's mother to leave. She knew the importance of reputation to the so-called upper-class people, so the initial contact with me was deliberately instigated. In order to integrate into this circle, kindness with a purpose was likely to deteriorate, especially after I went to high school. Every time I crossed half of the teaching building to wait for him after school, his cronies would laugh and say, "Yarek, your child bride has come to pick you up home." At that time, he had a strong affection for Ivy whom he had just met. His earlobes turned red with anger. The hazy feelings of young boys and girls became very awkward because of my presence. Ivy left angrily, and Yarek, who stayed at the scene, stared at me indifferently. The superficial peace was broken. The boy who gave me hyacinths in my childhood turned into a biting wolf, his words piercing my heart. "Lena, I hate you. Can't you see that? Who wants to go home with you?" Yarek forgot that going to and from school with me was an agreement made by our parents when we were young. I fell to the ground and didn't get up for a long time. Sand got into my eyes. In the summer with continuous cicada chirping, my heart was splashed with a bucket of ice water, and I was extremely embarrassed. Felix, who passed by, also saw my embarrassing state. He leaned against the door, blocking the sunlight that slanted into the door and the gazes of those who were nosy. After I finished crying, he said, "Coward, let's go." As a coward, I retreated to my safe haven and decided to cut off all contact with Yarek. But the next day, a loudspeaker playing on a loop shattered Yarek's popularity on campus. Felix made public the fact that his mother was a mistress. Those who were used to standing high were suddenly brought crashing down to the bottom. Ivy, the girl he had feelings for, stood firmly by his side like the heroine in a redemption story. But secretly, I saw her leaning on the shoulder of a strange man. She said with a grin, "A bastard will come crawling as soon as you show him a little affection. Anyway, he's quite good-looking. I'll ask him for money to support us in the future." And I was also forced to be tied to him. My association with him was no longer just my own wish. It also involved my father's will. After my mother left, my father became more and more focused on his career. It seemed that he wanted to prove in this way that my mother's departure was a mistake. Therefore, my father hated me. My thoughts didn't matter. What mattered was to maintain a good relationship with the Lorraine family. So, as if nothing had happened, I crossed half of the teaching building to wait for Yarek after school. Before I reached his classroom, Felix grabbed my hand at the stairway. His eyes were dark as he said, "Lena, you really disappoint me." I lowered my head, not daring to meet his gaze or refute him. After that day, because of Yarek, Mr. Lorraine made Felix transfer schools. I stood outside the corridor and watched him packing his thick books. As the sun was setting, it was just him and me in the empty corridor. "I'm sorry," I said in a hoarse voice, as if there was a thick ball of cotton stuffed in my throat. He didn't accept my apology and left without a word. Since then, I haven't said a single word to him, and after the storm passed, Yarek became the glorious young master again. The complicated and lingering innocent feelings between Ivy and him always required a pawn to promote their development whenever they had conflicts. When he needed me, he would affectionately call me Ivy. When I was on my period, he would skip class to buy me heating pads. When I was sad, he would take me to an amusement park and spend a whole day there. I became the perfect medicine to provoke Ivy. When he didn't need me, in front of Ivy, he would call me a lapdog and throw the bottle of water I gave him into the trash can on the crowded playground. This was who he was, a second-rate person in my eyes. As a coward, I needed to rely on this second-rate person to survive at home. Gradually, I got used to tolerating him. The next day, when I woke up, the sun was already high in the sky. I washed my face and then slowly turned on my phone. There were more than 20 missed calls on my phone, all from Yarek. My phone was also bombarded with his messages. I skimmed through the unsubstantial apology messages. The only sentence that caught my attention was, "Do you think Felix is a good person? He just wants to use you. Lena, don't be stupid." I silently clicked the delete button. Maybe it was self-deception. My father also sent me a message, basically saying that Yarek had apologized in person and admonishing me to know when to stop and not to make a big deal out of it. The real wedding was back on the agenda and was scheduled for next Tuesday. A wedding. I felt my blood rush to my head all of a sudden. It was absurd. I deleted and added words in the message box. After calming down, I directly called Yarek. He answered the phone quickly, as if he had been waiting for it. "You agreed to the wedding next Tuesday. Isn't this what you want? Playing hard to get and asking Felix for help. You just want to be my wife and help your father get the company's financing. Are you satisfied now?" Even through the phone, I could imagine the disdainful look on his face. Since I stood on his mother's side and drove Ivy abroad to study, in his eyes, I seemed to have changed from a spineless lapdog to a ruthless one. I scooped up some water and splashed it on my face. The water droplets slid down my face. In the mirror, the corners of my mouth had no trace of blood, and there were some red bloodshot eyes around my eyeballs. I looked just like a female ghost. I sneered and retorted, "What about Ivy? If she accidentally tries to jump off a building next time, will you abandon me at the wedding again?" His tone rose a few decibels. "Do you think she's as unscrupulous as you are? Willing to do anything for money, wasn't she?" I remembered when we were in our senior year of high school. She showed up at the coffee shop with a stack of Jarek's incriminating evidence. She smiled and said to Miss Lorraine that her good son had been drag racing as a minor and had been bullying underprivileged students because of his family background. Guess what would happen if these messages were posted online and his girlfriend personally testified to them? Would the Lorraine family's stock price drop? And would his father beat him to death? Ms. Lorraine panicked. I looked at that stack of materials again and again. I knew Yarek was a bit of a rascal, but he hadn't really done that many bad things. "I don't want much. Just 5 million yuan. And then I'll go study abroad." This was Ivy's choice after weighing the pros and cons. There was nothing wrong with her loving money more. Ms. Lorraine immediately agreed and handed over the check. I sat quietly by the side and didn't stop her. I just slapped her before she left. Was it for Yarek? Probably, because his sincere feelings had been deceived again. So the camera in the corner captured this scene, and I became the villain who helped Miss Lorraine break up the lovers. After she went abroad, the photo was sent to Jarek's email. Yarek came to question me angrily. "Lena, why did you drive her away?" I didn't tell him the truth. I smiled and didn't refute. She really isn't. Just like me, she had always been a fool. What did it have to do with me that she couldn't see people clearly? The wedding was thus decided. They were all certain that I would attend, so I definitely couldn't go against their wishes. One day before the wedding, I left the hotel where I had been staying for 3 days. The moment the door opened, Felix was standing with his arms crossed against the opposite wall. Lena, are you out of your mind? His tone was cold. When he was angry, his eyebrows furrowed into a knot. It seemed that he knew about my agreement to the makeup wedding. Why are you here? Why can't I be here? He stepped forward and grabbed my wrist, asking sternly, Yarek is a scumbag. Have you been blind all these years? I know, I said as I slowly pried his fingers off one by one. I looked up indifferently. But what does that have to do with you? Felix, are you pitying me? His tone was urgent, and his face turned red. How can it have nothing to do with me? The person you like is me, isn't it? Lena, I'm not pitying you. Aren't I the one who should be pitied? The person I like is marrying my despised illegitimate younger brother. How am I supposed to let this go? He stepped closer and closer, pressing me against the door. He buried his head on my shoulder, and the sadness in his tone was obvious. His words of accusation echoed in the empty corridor. I pushed him away indifferently, looking just like a heartless woman, but I knew it was all an illusion. Felix, stop lying to yourself. The day he was going to transfer schools, he and I were also standing outside the empty corridor like this. One was wronged, and the other was indifferent, except that our roles were reversed. He was the indifferent one, and I was the wronged one. You like me? Then why did you leave me at the intersection when I was 8? Why did you transfer schools by yourself when you were in your senior year of high school? Why did you disappear for a whole year when they said they wanted me to have an arranged marriage with you? Compared with Yarek, Felix and I were more like childhood sweethearts. We grew up in the same villa area, and our mothers were friends. He couldn't answer. I answered for him. When I was 8, my mother persuaded your aunt to get a divorce. So you resented me, in the first year of high school, because I didn't help you publicly expose Jarek's identity in the broadcasting room. You resented me too. When it came to the arranged marriage, you told your father that you didn't like idiots and went out of contact for a year directly. Am I right? I listened to you and followed Yarek for all those years. At first, I secretly helped you bully him. You didn't like him, and from primary school onwards, no one in the class except me was friends with him. In junior high school, you said he should be a fool, so he never listened to the classes. In high school, I thought it was enough and didn't want to do it anymore. Then I, who was useless, was abandoned by you. I listed one thing after another. Come to think of it, I was even more disgusting than Yarek because I never regarded him as a friend from the start. Everything was fake. You hate me more than Yarek, don't you? My chest felt stuffy, and I smiled self-deprecatingly. In your junior year of college, when you heard that your father wanted me to have an arranged marriage with you, you said you wouldn't be with an idiot and then went abroad, out of contact for 3 years. I heard everything in the study. He listened quietly to everything and didn't refute a single word because it was all true. He stood there stiffly, not daring to look at me. He bit his lower lip tightly, and his face lost all its color. I still remembered the look in Mr. Lorraine's eyes when he looked at me in the study that day. It was pitiful. I had already let it go at that time. So why was he acting like this again? Felix, stop disgusting me and stop disgusting yourself. Downstairs in the hotel, Jarek's car was parked at the entrance. I instinctively opened the door of the passenger seat. As soon as I looked inside, Ivy was sitting in the passenger seat and greeted me openly. Ivy, long time no see. The way she sat was just like Jarek's legitimate girlfriend. I raised my eyebrows and glanced at Yarek, who was sitting in the driver's seat. He hadn't shaved for 3 days, and there were some ambiguous red marks on his neck. He looked extremely disheveled. There was a gloomy look between his eyebrows, and he asked me coldly, "You haven't been home for 3 days. Have you had enough fun?" If it weren't for Ivy beside him, it would sound a bit like a resentful husband. I didn't say a word and slammed the car door shut. I had just confronted Felix, and I really didn't have the energy to deal with 2 idiots. Anyone could order a taxi on their phone. Before I could place the order, Ivy voluntarily got out of the passenger seat. She gritted her teeth and grabbed my arm with both hands. "I'm sorry, Ivy. I didn't expect you to have such strong objections. Yarek just wanted to send me to the hotel. I wasn't interested in arguing with them, so I directly shook off Ivy, and she fell to the ground." Ivy let out a cry of surprise. Her face turned pale, and she forced a smile. "I'm sorry." Yarek got out of the car, pulled Ivy up, and stared at me fiercely. "Putting an end to this farce. That's enough." I also thought it was enough. Many people stopped to watch. Felix, who followed closely behind, stood not far behind Ivy and saw this scene. I didn't want to be treated like a monkey in a zoo, especially now, being watched by others. I retorted, Yarek, have you had enough fun? He might want to make a fool of himself. But I didn't. I quickly got into the passenger seat. After he glanced at the crowd, he got into the car immediately without even comforting Ivy. It was just him and me in the car. The atmosphere in the car was terribly suffocating, and only the sound of the engine starting could be heard. After a while, he was the first to speak, and the anger in his voice could hardly be suppressed. Were you in such a hurry to leave because of Felix? What did you two do in the hotel? He had indeed seen it. What could we do? I was exhausted and felt it was ironic. I leaned against the seat and looked up at the roof of the car. I never asked what you and Ivy did. The car stopped abruptly by the side of the road, and the inertia of the brakes made me instinctively lean forward. He turned his head and glared at me. He, who had always had a cold face in front of me, had a new expression. Because you know I won't have any relationship with her. And you don't care at all. You don't care about me at all. He was on the verge of a breakdown, repeating it over and over again. I didn't care about him. If he had accused me of this in high school, I wouldn't have anything to say. But in order to be in the same university as him, I gave up the idea of going abroad to study and seeing my mother. And I gave up the opportunity to get out of my father's control, because he liked to eat light food. Whenever we had a meal together, I never ate anything with a strong flavor. After we got engaged, every time he left me to see Ivy and I went back to the Lorraine family's house alone, I was afraid that he would be beaten by his father with a stick. So I would always smile and cover for him. If all these things were considered as not caring, then how could I prove that I cared? I once also thought with great joy that he had liked me. After all, in the university where Ivy wasn't around, the two of us were no different from any other couple. He, who loved to sleep in, would accompany me to climb the mountain overnight just because I said I wanted to watch the sunrise. He, who didn't like to watch art films, would also accommodate my preferences. We were like food bloggers, leaving our footprints in many restaurants. All the people who knew him and me thought we were deeply in love before Ivy came back. But after she came back, they all said that Yarek no longer loved me. And I, Lena, seemed to be bewitched in front of Yarek, letting him take whatever he wanted. No one questioned my love for him. Only he, who was in the middle of it, was saying in a breakdown that I didn't care about him. I opened my mouth, but in the end, my throat seemed to be blocked by a heavy stone, and I didn't say a word in defense. I didn't want to prove how much I had liked him in the past. It was all too late. What about you? I twitched the corners of my mouth, and my tone was unusually calm. There was no longer the hysteria I used to have when arguing with him. What am I in your eyes? I won't bring up the past. Let's just talk about the day you ran away from the wedding. Do you know that leaving me behind would make me a laughingstock? Or was I already a joke to you? He turned his head and hurriedly explained. I didn't mean to. He said he didn't, but his actions said otherwise. I suddenly felt tired. I lost interest in the plan of getting back at him and the planned runaway from the wedding. I said, let's just end it like this. It's really boring. At the beginning, both of us had bad motives. It started terribly, and after persevering for many years, we ended up with a farce. Don't even think about it. He tightly grabbed my wrist, his eyes red. Now that Felix is back, you want to dump me. Lena, I won't let you have your way. He still blamed others for the problems between him and me. He didn't think at all about how big his own problems were. I sneered, think whatever you want. My indifferent attitude angered him. He pressed my head with one hand and bit down hard. It wasn't like a kiss. It was more like two wild beasts biting each other. I slapped him in return. He touched his face and smiled strangely. Lena, let's just go on like this forever. He was crazy, but I didn't want to be tied to a madman for life. After that, he drove me home. He was certain that my father would never let me make a scene tomorrow, and that I was afraid of my father. But I was no longer a child longing for love. The next morning, my father forced me to the wedding venue. Last time was a huge embarrassment, so this time the two families were cautious and didn't invite many people. It's a pity. I actually wanted everyone to witness this farce together. As the makeup artist was doing my makeup, I played with my phone casually. One message after another came in on my phone. It was from Ivy. Lena, do you think you can tie Yarek down? She sent one scandal photo of her and him after another, each with a date watermark. There was one of them holding hands on the beach on Valentine's Day, with the sun shining on the waves. At that time, I waited for him at the dinner table alone all night. There was one of them watching the New Year's fireworks together, which were so dazzling. On that day, I made call after call that he didn't answer. Finally, she said, "The person he likes is me." I ignored her. Well, this was just the right material. Everyone could enjoy this show together. I sent these photos to the wedding background that was going to be played later. Just then, a message popped up on the screen. Less than 3 hours until departure time. Yes, I had booked the train ticket long ago and had no intention of attending this wedding at all. The Lorraine family wanted a good daughter-in-law, so I would show them my rebellion. My father wanted both fame and fortune, so I would make him extremely angry. Yarek wanted everything, so I would make sure he got nothing. It would be great to create chaos. Let everyone lose face together. The process was familiar, but my mindset was different. Last time, I walked onto the stage with a smile, looking forward to a wonderful future with Yarek. This time, I still walked onto the stage with a smile, but to watch everyone else make a fool of themselves. It was the same MC as last time. He really had a hard time when he said with a smile that it was time to play the beautiful records of the bride and groom's relationship. The scene I had arranged didn't appear. Instead, Ivy showed up in a wedding dress right on time. "Yarek, the person you like is me, right?" There was an uproar at the scene. The security guards behind rushed forward to drag her out as she had forcefully barged into the venue. As her words fell, the LED screen behind showed her chat records with me and the contract for asking for money to study abroad. Her innocent mask was torn off. She bit her lip, looking pitiful, but no one would be deceived by her anymore. Yarek also stared at the screen behind. His body was trembling, but it wasn't because he cared about Ivy's deception. Instead, he grabbed my hand and hurriedly explained to me, "Ivy, I didn't do so many things with her. The person in the photos isn't me." I shook off his hand. "It doesn't matter anymore." Coincidentally, Felix, who was sitting in the guest seats, also stood up. Looking closely, I realized that he was dressed extraordinarily grandly today. His custom-made suit made him look more like the groom than Yarek. It was like in the movie where Chilya got married, and they were really causing a ruckus. Before he could say anything explosive, I took the microphone from the MC's hand first. I announced firmly, "Today's wedding is off. There won't be any future between me and Yarek either." Before everyone could react in the chaos, I directly fled the scene. The person who ran away with me asked me, "Do you feel better?" She was wearing sunglasses, a leather jacket, and her light brown dyed hair hung casually around her waist. It was hard to tell that she was already in her 50s. It was my mother. When she was young, because she was dissatisfied with her husband's family's arrangements, she resolutely left home and drifted for half her life. Time had not left any marks on her face. She looked even more dazzling than when she was being bullied by her husband at home back then. Did I feel better? I thought back to that absurd wedding banquet. Maybe a little, but maybe not. I couldn't give an answer. In the many years of entanglement with Yarek, even when we quarreled, our doomed relationship had never really ended. But I thought that life shouldn't be about looking back. Unhappy things should be left behind and become the past. When we arrived at the station, I still hadn't answered her question. My mother didn't seem to really expect an answer from me either. My mother and I had been separated for a long time. She seemed to be used to parting and didn't show even a trace of sadness. She leaned against the front of the Jeep, took off her sunglasses, and waved to me. She was very free and easy, just like when she left home with a suitcase all those years ago. "Have a great trip." Blood relations are really an interesting thing. I was walking the path she had walked. I left home in a hurry. My luggage was small, but my happiness was full. Lying on the vast prairie, there was no oppressive ceiling above my head. Looking out, there were blue sky and white clouds. My heart, which had been occupied by someone before, now had that person shrinking in the corner, and my heart became broad. I also became generous and was happy to share my happiness on moments. Yarek and Felix were always vying to be the first to like my posts. I casually blocked them both at once. In fact, after I left, Yarek persistently called me over 100 times. I didn't answer any of them and even blocked him. As a result, he came to me in person to explain everything from the past. He asked me to meet at a coffee shop. I don't remember what he said. I only remember that the iced Americano that day was as bitter as my previous life. He was waiting for my forgiveness. But I took a sip of coffee and asked him a question. Yarek, what's my favorite dish? He was confused for a moment and gave a completely wrong answer. No matter how much he said he loved me, he really didn't know me at all. Give me a chance. I poured the unfinished iced Americano over his head. Yarek, I'm not a masochist. This bitter iced Americano is just like you. I won't touch it or you ever again. He left in a daze and didn't pester me anymore. Because Felix joined the big fight for the family property, and his mother couldn't stand the mess. Felix was sensible enough not to be as annoying as Yarek. But one night, he asked me while drunk, if I hadn't left in high school, would there have been a good outcome? At that time, I was camping in the desert. The stars were hanging high in the sky. Humans were as insignificant as the sand under our feet in front of them. I told him then that there was no if. Yarek said that he used Ivy again and again to get my attention because he wanted me to value him, whether it was through hurting me or making me hate him. But what about Felix? He had no reason, if I had to find one. His reason was that he didn't love me enough at that time because I wasn't submissive enough to him. Once missed, it's missed, just like my father and my mother. After my father knew that my mother had picked me up, he stopped forcing me. The continuous public opinion made him be blamed by the board of directors. As the one with the most shares, he stepped down. I drove the Jeep and wandered around, like a weed that didn't need to be trimmed, growing freely. Yarek's perspective. When did Yarek find out that Lena was an undercover agent sent by Felix? Probably in the 6th grade of primary school when no one was willing to be his deskmate, and he happened to see Lena spreading rumors about him in the classroom. The grievance of being betrayed welled up in his heart. He wished he could rush out and ask her why. If he asked, would he no longer be able to be friends with her? He closed his mouth, was angry for the whole morning, and didn't say a word to Lena. But she didn't notice at all. As soon as class was over, she ran out of the classroom, eager to go home. Because Felix was at home, she never paid attention to her facial expressions. In front of Felix, there was never anyone else in her eyes. After entering junior high school, Lena bought a lot of game consoles for him. He thought she had a change of heart and finally wanted to compensate him. In fact, it was still because of the task assigned by Felix. At that time, Yarek thought that it didn't matter if he didn't make progress. Letting Lena cling to him for a lifetime, was this a kind of alternative success? After all, the only one he cared about was her. As a result, after entering high school, Lena, who had never been separated from him before, didn't ask to be in the same class as him, except for waiting for him to go home together after school. She no longer clung to him. She no longer cared about his social life, whether his grades were good or bad, and she didn't spread any bad things about him. At that time, Yarek only had one thought. She saw that he was a failure and completely abandoned him. He made a lot of friends and was the center of attention. She ignored him. He joined the basketball team, and everyone came to watch his games. She still didn't watch him. He had a rumored girlfriend. She remained indifferent. In a fit of anger, he naughtily wanted to bully her. Even if she hated him, he wanted to tie her to him forever. Felix couldn't take her away either. But the human heart is a bottomless abyss. After Felix left, he was the only one left by her side. But he wasn't satisfied. Because she didn't care about him, Ivy's provocation and his indifference, she never took them to heart. He hated his own powerlessness and also hated her. Why wasn't he in her heart? He wanted to bully her on one hand, and on the other hand, when she was alone, he would skip class to make her happy. He knew he was so annoying, but there was no way. It seemed that only in this way could Lena see him, even if it was disgust. It was better than being ignored. The photo of Ivy being driven away by her was sent to his email. He wasn't angry. He was even a little happy because he had always known that Ivy didn't treat him sincerely. Was her anger a sign that she cared? But he couldn't show it. He questioned the reason, because on the other end of the phone, his first love Ivy was crying and saying, Yarek, I had a car accident. Maybe I'll never see you again. He boldly thought that maybe Lena liked him a little bit too. Otherwise, why would she apply to the same school as him? But when he knew that Felix had refused the arranged marriage, she walked out of the study in a daze. He was both glad and angry. What was wrong with him? Later, when Felix went abroad and lost contact, he laughed wildly for a whole day without any sympathy. And then he and Lena got on the right track. But after Felix was about to return to the country, his sense of inferiority and unease welled up again. Coincidentally, Ivy returned to the country, and they used each other. In the end, They hurt the sincere Lena. Finally, when they met at the coffee shop, she said she wasn't a masochist. Yes, he claimed to like her, but it seemed that since high school, all he had brought her was hurt. He had to let go. The end.